"What the hell do you mean we're out of gas?" It was more of a shout than a question. Panicked Paula turned her head in search of something or someone, her black hair flying in one direction or the other. She instinctively touched her head to make sure the wig was sitting straight. This cry only added to Bart's confusion as his silver BMW coupe stalled on the side of a busy boulevard lined with some of the city's most notorious motels. The fuel gauge was at 0. Paula was furious, but Bart was just confused. He was sure there was at least a quarter left in the tank when they parked 2 hours ago, just 5 blocks away. A man who drives a new silver Beamer can afford more than a $20 an hour motel somewhere on the outskirts of town. So for all of their 3 weekly meetings, Bart drove Paula away from these former Holiday Inns and Howard Johnson's, turned to cheap hotels, to where the street became more respectable and went up a small hill. Behind the locked door at the upscale Summit Inn, they were no longer Bart, the unmarried team leader at the center of an accounting firm, and Paula, the married administrative assistant in his department. They became two teenagers in their 30s who had sex for pleasure. The threat of dismissal hardly bothered them, especially Bart, because he was her boss. But they decided that they probably weren't the only pair of coworkers who were into each other. Moreover, they acted very carefully, at least until they stalled on one of the busiest streets in the city in a car that attracted attention. Bart noticed Paula looking around the street anxiously, but he didn't know exactly why. It was a long way from their office, as well as from the area where he assumed she lived. There was little chance that anyone would recognize them, even if they had to wait a little while for a tow truck to arrive. They both listened silently to the old song that was still playing on the radio of the stopped car, a song that warned that the night has 1,000 eyes. Bart was hardly worried. After all, this is a huge city with a population of 500,000 people, and the couple were together in daylight. But Paula's stomach was twisting with worry. She thought that she had deliberately kept silent about something important. For her, this city had 2,400 eyes, and at least 600 of them were in service at the moment. "What scared you so much?" Bart, still wondering what happened with the gasoline last week, was even more puzzled by Paula's nervous behavior. "I already said, this is my concern." She waved it off, glancing out the window of room 422 and adjusting the edge of the curtain to cover her bare breasts. This was their 4th week of meetings. They always met on Wednesdays, when their colleagues would not mind their absence. At this time, they allegedly should have been checking clients and not hiding in a hotel room. It was always the Summit Inn, which they felt was a secluded and safe place. Bart swore that she was the first person he brought there. Moreover, he promised that she was the first work-related mistress and claimed that she was also the first married woman in his life. "Do you think your husband won't recognize you in this black wig?" Paula let go of the curtain, sat astride him, shook out her bright brown hair, and glared at him. I said, "We never talk about my husband." "Never," she said sternly. "I'm not afraid of him, no matter who he is," Bart continued. "If he is not able to satisfy you, then he will not be able to scare me. Never. Not. Let's talk." "Oh, Nam," she repeated, emphasizing each word and abruptly lifting her formal office dress from the carpet. "That's all for today." Their meeting ended early with a disappointing score, 1 pleasure for each. Bart agreed to leave, deciding that it was worth sacrificing this week to save future meetings. Putting on the wig, Paula carefully led him to the BMW. Now Bart screamed. Damn it! Given last week's fuel disaster, he double-checked the gas gauge before parking behind the hotel. Then the tank was half full, and now it was completely filled. Had Paula's charm really clouded his mind for 2 weeks in a row? A strange coincidence, that's what he called it. Paula's head was spinning. It didn't seem particularly sinister, but she remembered the words that her husband often repeated at home. There are no coincidences. With caution that increased her vigilance a little, she retrieved her car and returned to the office for a maintenance stop of sorts. She threw away her soaked, revealing panties and took a spare pair from the bottom drawer of her desk, then washed herself thoroughly. After quickly brushing her teeth and looking in the mirror for hickeys, she went home to Bick. It was an unusual nickname and, moreover, not his real name. He didn't particularly like it. Bick received it as a result of a bloody episode that brought him local fame. He was once an ordinary off-duty cop standing in line at a bank to deposit a check when two psychopaths with guns broke into the building for money and something more. They were already dragging the pretty cashier towards the exit when the officer, known until that moment as Harold, rushed forward, armed only with a ballpoint pen. A few furious seconds later, the hostage was safe, and the surprised robber holding her was writhing in pain, sacrificing his right eye in a failed attempt to keep his gun. Beek's first official action was to use the weapon in a shootout with another bandit who died outside the lending department. Bick himself almost died, losing a lot of blood due to a wound in the side. Now, 10 years later, he still occasionally makes headlines as a homicide star. He could read people, as Paula knew, but not always her. During her 8 years of marriage, she successfully hid several harmless secrets. This inspired her to think that she could deceive Bick with a more serious secret. Bick was not the brute that bank reports might have made him out to be. The few people he allowed near him called him soft, thoughtful, unusually patient, even philosophical. If catching bad guys was his first goal, then correcting them was his second, if that was possible. He believed that a couple of sympathetic nudges could be as effective as severe punishment in getting a petty criminal back on the right path. He was especially impressed by the rare criminals around him, usually his informants, who managed to turn their lives around before they crossed the point of no return. When Paula got home around 5:30, Bick was cooking pork chops. He didn't always cook and wasn't always home so early, but he was on duty on Tuesday night and was called at 2 o'clock in the morning. In the kitchen, Paula massaged his shoulders and asked for details. The answer, as always, was restrained. A young man, cheating wife, suicide, carbon monoxide. Paula felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with guilt. Suicides didn't usually make the news, so she couldn't verify whether Beek was telling the truth or perhaps just hinting at her. But no, if he really suspected her of cheating, the fictional story would probably involve a husband killing his wife and her lover. Although the gas tank episode bothered her, the explanation was simple and harmless. Bart might be a little absent-minded. The most comforting thing was that Bick's love for her had not diminished one iota. His welcoming kiss was still warm and full, a slight tingling of the chest still playful. The smile was sincere, and chops in the oven were her favorite dish. She realized that her love for Bick had not changed either. She felt the excitement in his kiss and pinch. She liked that he knew exactly what she liked both in the oven and in bed. She stopped to think not about the gravity of her betrayal, but about its strange lightness. Bick gave her everything she wanted, and she thought, before her flirtation with Bart went too far, Bick had also given her everything she needed. Paula was aware from the very beginning that she had foolishly allowed herself to be carried away by the mere lustful admiration of a horny man. Not the best man, not even that good, but new. Until Bart convinced her to go to bed with him at the Summit Inn, she had always believed that intimate experiences with 6 ex-boyfriends had satisfied her curiosity enough for her to remain faithful to Bick forever. She had no intention of starting an affair, Paula was sure of that. But she was also sure that she was not ready to finish it. For now, she would never leave Beek for anyone, especially Bart. But now there was still a special thrill in Bart's arms, and the pleasure on his sheets was light. If she had any kind of plan at all, it was that the excitement would eventually wear off, and she would happily return to monogamy and finally start a family. In her perverted mind, she even considered herself attentive to Bick. She never rejected his sexual overtures, which, despite the long and irregular hours of detective work, amounted to about 2 or 3 times a week. She insisted that Bart use condoms, and, the most important thing in her excuses, she never did with Bart what she did not regularly do with Beek. But that left so many variations on other types of sex that she never had to refuse Bart. Her biggest concession to Bick was ensuring that he would never find out. Hence the wig, which from a distance made her a completely different woman. At work, she had a jacket and sunglasses that she never showed to her husband. She didn't wear any special underwear for Bart. She insisted that he not use any scents or leave any traces. They drove away from the office separately Wednesday afternoon, with her car parked in a crowded Walmart parking lot a mile from the office before they continued on in the BMW. Paula's biggest fear was that Bart might get pulled over for a traffic violation while she was in the car with him, or get into an accident, or stall in the middle of the road. Not all the police knew Bika, and even fewer knew her. But if one of them suddenly noticed her in an obvious wig in a strange man's car, she simply could not allow that. Bart didn't know whose wife he seduced. Maybe he would recognize the nickname Bick, maybe he wouldn't. Paula refused to tell him about this, believing that it would be a betrayal of her husband's dignity and perhaps even scare Bart away. He was asking random questions in the office one day, surprised at how little anyone knew about her family life. Paula followed Bick's advice to use her maiden name professionally and share personal information with only two close friends at work. Was she a good enough actress, Paula wondered, to follow Beek's suspicions without causing them herself? She decided there was no need for this. She would certainly have noticed the early signs. But lying always breeds at least mild paranoia in otherwise honest people. Did it mean anything that Bick had increased the frequency of their intimate relationships in recent weeks? Or that he often seduced her on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but somehow never on Wednesday evenings after she returned? Paula didn't spend much time thinking about what her husband would do if he found out. She was too careful and smart to get caught. Strangely, for a policeman, he did not seem particularly suspicious in his family life. And strangely, for the husband of a beautiful woman, he was not jealous. He trusted her completely. Nothing made her feel more guilty than realizing this. At worst, she believed she could keep Bick away with a torrent of apologies and affection. She knew he loved her too much to hurt her, too strong to leave. She could explain her only sin well, a chain of sins, but with one man. Bick will be hurt, but he will understand. Since Bart meant only superficial pleasure to her, Paula knew that she could promise to end the affair and actually keep the promise. A quick glance at the calendar made Paula gasp. The next Wednesday falls on the 24th of the month. It was their wedding anniversary. Bick will be waiting for love this evening. Moreover, she was not heartless enough to desecrate this magical date with treason. Wait, no, still no. She was wrong. The 24th is Thursday, not Wednesday. Well then, the show goes on. The passion in room 218 has not yet reached its peak. Bart was taking Paula from behind when they were both surprised by a loud knock on the door. "Room service," said a male voice. Bart carefully looked through the peephole and saw a young bellhop standing behind a cart covered with a white tablecloth on which stood a large bottle in an ice bucket. The guy knocked again. The couple decided it was better to open the door rather than attract unnecessary attention. Paula hid her nakedness under the sheet, and Bart put on pants and a t-shirt before opening the door. "Your champagne and cheese plate for our anniversary," the guy announced, his gaze lingering on the unmade bed and the musk-saturated air. "We didn't order this," Bart said. Unaware that it was the eve of Paula's anniversary, he didn't realize how strange this scene was. Paula realized this instantly and gasped quietly. There was a moment of silence before the intruder looked at the card marked room 318 inches and muttered, "Crap." With a shrug and a gesture of apology, he turned and left. Paula's heart began to beat faster. "Let's leave," she announced, not caring that Bart's dissatisfaction was obvious through his pants. At home, her eyes filled with tears of relief when her relaxed, smiling husband hugged her tenderly at the door. He noticed her tears and asked what happened. "I'm just so excited about our anniversary tomorrow," she explained. He offered to rent a nice hotel room to celebrate the holiday. What about Regency West with its 4-star rating? She tried not to react. It was next door to the hotel where she met Bart. Paula desperately searched for even a hint of suspicion in Bick's eyes, but nothing. Paula felt like her insides were falling apart. Strange things were happening around, but they made no sense. They, of course, could not mean that Bick suspected something. His behavior indicated otherwise. There are no coincidences, she thought all the time. But can this be called a coincidence? For Barnes, the decay took place in the head. What's wrong with her? Life is full of meaningless little things, but she took everything too seriously. It ruined all the fun. Vic's anniversary night at Regency West was perhaps the best since their honeymoon. Nothing was left behind. Everything she had ever done with Bart, she repeated with Beak on this night of celebration. In bed, on the couch, on the countertop, in the shower, they celebrated their anniversary to the fullest. Lying next to Bick, breathing heavily, Paula could not come to terms with her internal conflict. She never loved Bick more. Still, she didn't feel like she was done with Bart. It was impossible to understand this. She was comforted by the thought that next year she would return here with Bick. When Bart would be just a pale memory, the risk of exposure would disappear, and her conscience would be calm. 6 days later, she was breathing heavily again in another hotel with another man. This time, they completely fulfilled all their desires. They were walking back to the parking lot, holding hands, when Paula's knees suddenly gave way. Right next to the passenger side of Bart's BMW was a completely unremarkable, dark gray Ford Fusion. Cheap wheels, basic seats, just like the Detective Bureau sedan that sat in her driveway every night. It had no visible signal lights or police radio antenna, but there weren't any on Bick's car either. Instinctively, she scanned the parking lot, then scrutinized the Fusion, looking for any clues. There was nothing to indicate that this was Bick's car, but nothing said that it wasn't her. Bart realized she was distracted again, but didn't understand why. And he certainly didn't understand why she sighed so relieved when he pulled out of the parking lot. Paula noticed that the Fusion did not have local license plates. If you think about it, it even calmed her down. Her fears turned out to be far-fetched. But this feeling did not last long. Arriving home at the usual time, she saw the same gray Beaker Fusion in the yard, but now with license plates from another state, Louisiana. She was sure the car at the Summit Inn had California license plates. But what should she think about the fact that both license plates had black numbers and letters on a white background, and the names of the states were written in a stylized red font? Paula had never been so tense walking into her own home, and then she smelled it pork chops again. Sweet hugs, loving kisses, normal dinner conversation. She plucked up her courage and asked Bick about changing numbers. He explained that he and his partner were on surveillance, and that the department uses numbers from several states for such assignments. Okay, she thought. It may indeed have been an unmarked police car at the Summit Inn, but it wasn't Bick's car. The colors of the license plates are, well, a coincidence. Courtney P. Gladholder. The brain is the main sexual organ, of course, and Paula had it mixed up. Part of her wanted to end her relationship with Bart immediately. Part of her wanted to move the affair to another hotel. Part of her just wanted him inside her in any way possible. She decided to save the date for next Wednesday. Maybe it will be the last. Or maybe not. She continued to be reassured by the lack of signals from her husband. That is, unless she was actually receiving some kind of signal from him. Confusion is the right word. It didn't help matters that her and Bart's passion cycles had been particularly synchronized this week. Their usual 2 hours of bliss stretched to an extraordinary 3. On the way home, being late, she called Bick on his mobile. He didn't answer. She knew that if he was busy, he wouldn't be able to. Nothing unusual. The driveway was empty. There's no one in the kitchen either. No pork chops today. Everything was in its place, except for the newspaper clipping that lay on the kitchen counter. Dated 4 years earlier, its headline read, "Deputy Police Chief Survives Shooting." Why, she wondered, had Bick left this here? Paula remembered this incident well. Courtney P. Gladholder, who had been out of patrol for 10 years, spotted the wanted car and returned to his role as a street cop. The gunfire left him with a severed femoral artery. If Beak had not been there to use his belt as a tourniquet, the article said, Gladholder would have bled to death in the street. The photo of Gladholder in the article seemed oddly familiar to her. She vaguely remembered him from the ceremony where he and Bick received awards, but it seemed to her that she had seen him quite recently, unlikely at a police event. Due to nerve damage in his leg, Gladholder retired. Without paying much attention to the clipping, Paula walked up the stairs to the master bedroom. Everything seemed normal there, but not in the main dressing room. She saw a 6-foot gap in the crossbar where Beek's things should hang. Feeling the ground slipping beneath her feet, Paula dialed Bick's number again and shuddered when she heard his phone ringing just a few feet away. It was plugged into the charger on the nightstand on his side of the bed, or what used to be his side of the bed. Peeking out from under the phone was a business card that helped answer her weekly riddles. From a distance, she was horrified to recognize the familiar Summit in logo. As she walked closer, she focused her eyes on the name, Courtney P., Gladholder, manager. It was as if fate had squeezed Paula's chest in a vice. She could barely breathe. She screamed, "No, no, no!" Then she called Bick by name, thinking, praying that he was waiting somewhere nearby to hear her explanation. There was no answer. Desperate wife. With shaking hands, barely able to dial a number, she called Benny Wickerhouse, who had been Bick's partner for a year. Before she could say a word, she heard him take a deep breath and say, "Paula, call Captain Lankersham." Then Benny hung up. She tried again, but he didn't answer anymore. Jack Lankersham, head of the homicide department, went home for the night. The control center promised to send him a message, but he never called back. Paula couldn't think of anyone else to turn to find her husband. She knew almost no one in the department. Bick did not bring work home and did not discuss his personal life at work. His parents died. He had no brothers or sisters. Paula was his best friend. He always told her that he didn't need anyone else. She was frightened, realizing that no matter how lonely she felt that night, Bick must be even worse. Of course, he won't hurt himself. Or Bart. He'll be back tomorrow. He'll be back tomorrow. He'll be back tomorrow, she repeated between sobs over and over again until she fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, she was already at Lankersham's office at the police headquarters before he arrived. He motioned for her to follow him into the office. His gloomy expression and the fact that he never called back seemed to confirm that Bick had told him everything. "Where is he?" she shouted, getting to the point before the captain could say a word. "I need to talk to him." Lankersham, accustomed to dealing with hysterical people, showed little sympathy for a situation of her own making. In an even voice, he said, "You can't." "Oh my God, is he okay? Is he injured?" As soon as she finished speaking, Lankersham shook his head and replied, "He's fine, but he left." "Gone? Where did you go? I have to find him." "Paula, do you care about the JTTF?" "I guess. Joint Counter-Terrorism Task Force. This is an FBI project where federal agents and local police officers work as a team." To him. "One of our officers working in this group fell ill, and last week Bick agreed to replace him. I was surprised until Gladholder told me why. Do you remember Courtney Gladholder?" She moaned. "A day or two after Bick agreed to help, he told me his story and asked me to give him 3 days to change his mind," the captain told her. "He said that perhaps you still have time to confess and ask for mercy." Apparently, this never happened. Paula lifted her chin from her chest and nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes," she insisted. "It was a mistake. I'm really sorry. If only I could see him, talk to him. I love him, and I know he loves me. He left his mobile phone. Do you have his new number? Where did he stay? Please?" Lankersham's stern glare intensified. "He will travel a lot. Undercover. This is a minimum of 6 months of work. Most of the time he will be, so to speak, out of town." While writing something down, he added, "Here is the emergency number for Beek at the FBI where you can leave a message. I can guarantee he will get it. Of course, I can't guarantee anything more." When the room became too quiet, Paula, still sobbing, stood up and thanked Lankersham. As she left, she looked back, but could not understand whether she saw pity or only contempt in his eyes. "There are no coincidences," she whispered to herself as she stumbled upon a police parking lot among a small sea of unmarked Ford Fusions of different colors. Some of them were dark gray, but only the one who is now standing next to her car had a black wig on the roof. After spending 6 straight days consumed by tears, Paula reluctantly returned to work. Her lover, Bart, was probably angry. She did not answer his dozens of calls, messages, and letters. He didn't know where she lived, and of course he had no idea what had happened. His back was turned to the open doorway as she entered his office. "It's over," she said. Her voice was soft but firm. Soft from pain, not from seductiveness. When he turned in his chair, she began to answer before he could ask questions. "It was a mistake. Stupid hobby. I don't love you. I don't want you. I know the office is small and I still have to work for you. But I'm sending out job applications this week and you need to give me a good recommendation." Silence hung in the air before Bart answered. "Does he know?" Paula turned away, partly to hide her tears and partly to reinforce the promise she had made to herself not to humiliate Bick by not discussing him with her lover. Well, now with her ex-lover. "Does he know who I am? Is he angry? Should I be afraid?" Paula turned around, sizing him up with her eyes, not believing that she had thrown away her perfect life for this. "I don't know exactly what he knows or how he feels. We didn't talk. I'm sure he must know who you are. I'm not saying you should be afraid, but if you knew who he was, you would be afraid." "So who is he?" Bart asked with concern in his voice. "It's none of your business. This is unfair. He knows who I am, but I don't know who he is. How can I protect myself?" "You can't," Bastard Paula said as she walked towards the door. "What I did is my fault, and I admit it. But seducing married women and you knew I was married is a dangerous business. I have one piece of advice that you should listen to very carefully. There are no coincidences." At home, Paula spent hours checking and rechecking her cell phone for messages or emails. When he called, she rushed to the phone, but there was nothing from Bick. Wickiuck House and Lancashire almost did not answer her calls, barely tolerating her appeals. She must have left a dozen messages on the FBI hotline. The operator accepted them, but there was no result. Paula was eating tuna from a can in her kitchen, imagining Bick roasting pork chops for dinner, when her reverie was interrupted by knocks on the door. Bick wouldn't knock. "Isn't it?" The stranger on the steps handed her a large envelope. Her heart began to pound, and she waited to hear the words, "You are served." But the man left without saying a word. With a shaking hand, Paula dumped the contents onto the kitchen table, miscellaneous financial documents and a note in Bick's handwriting. It said, "It will be good for you. The bank account and credit cards remain active. My salary will continue to come directly. I will withdraw $3,000 for expenses on the 15th of each month." There was no signature, no emotions, no mention of her betrayal, divorce, or forgiveness. No address, no phone number, no indication when or if he will return at all. The detective's wife noticed one clue. There were about a dozen small oval wrinkles on the page, each about the size of a teardrop. Paula added a dozen more of her own. Her life slowly returned to normal, at least in the fact that she again worked, ate, and sometimes managed to sleep. But the ongoing weight of her situation was suffocating. Sometimes she could barely take a deep breath. The food had no taste. The music had no rhythm. When she tried to watch TV, every channel showed the same thing. A vague overview of the downfall of her life, played over and over again in bleak black and white. She felt no need to turn to others for comfort. Not to his mother, who was 500 miles to the east, nor to his brother, who lived twice as close to the south. Not to her friends, who once clearly admired her selfless marital happiness. Nobody knew her secret. Nobody but Bart, and her feelings for him died. Not love. She was never truly in love with him. But not hatred either. He may have been a pig, but she knew that she herself had willingly, and even enjoyed joining in this dirty business. Bart was just a hobby, a selfish pleasure that any new body would give. However, the memory of him did not bring any excitement. 2 weeks into her desperation, Faced with the prospect of another lonely night, Paula let her fingers slip under the elastic of her panties, seeking release. She knew from experience that even vigorous rubbing would be useless without the use of imagination. Only after achieving a small pleasure, the only one available to her, did Paula realize that, without thinking, she had imagined herself writhing under Beak. It seemed that Bart, who had recently been the subject of her vulgar fantasies, had metaphorically left the building. As if her situation wasn't bad enough, the police officer's wife begins each day knowing she could end up a widow. This risk can be acknowledged through an extra hug or a long goodbye kiss at the door. But for Paula, there were no more hugs or kisses. All that remained was the fear that Bick might die today without knowing how sorry she was, how much she loves him, only him, and without having the opportunity to atone for his guilt. This fear, more than anything else, prompted Paula to seek counseling. It was not the police psychologist, but the woman he recommended. Twice a week, Paula met with her for an hour. Without her husband, the counselor could hardly appreciate the prospects for what was now the only driving force in Paula's heart: reconciliation. While little was said about the couple's future, the sessions shed light on some important aspects of Paula's own past. Her teenage years were filled with disappointment, too many pimples and not enough curves. Her beauty blossomed late in college, and despite several serious relationships at the time, some deep part of her soul yearned to recapture the lost years of school dates and male adoration. Bick, being her knight in shining armor, at the same time became her subconscious rival, drawing too much attention to himself at meetings with friends and relatives. The consultant explained that Paula was dry firewood for the spark that a smart talker like Bart could ignite. This new understanding of her motives for betrayal gave Paula small but tangible emotional support. The sun shone brighter and the wind seemed fresher as she walked out the door of the psychologist's office to her red Hyundai Elantra parked just a few steps away. Paula recalled how she was in a hurry and had difficulty finding an empty seat right at the entrance. She clearly remembered how she drove into this place with her nose and felt how the wheels hit the curb. So how come her car was now parked backwards? She always hated backing out. I don't think she's ever parked like this in her life. A fresh stream of tears soaked the front of her sweater as she got behind the wheel. She was still receiving signals from Bick. He must have used his spare key to get into her car. At this place, just an hour ago, she got out of the car and looked around, suddenly realizing that he might be somewhere nearby. Maybe he's hiding. Maybe he's watching her reaction. Looking from left to right showed nothing. But how can you spot an expert observer? She realized that she would only see him if he wanted it himself. Paula was so stunned that if the road had been busy, she might not have made it to work in one piece. Before my new job. Just as she told Bart, Paula found a new job in her previous field. The distance that separated her from her former lover brought her comfort, although any attraction to him had long passed. She suggested that Bick's antics during her infidelity were a kind of warning, a way to make it clear that he knew without saying it outright. And, oh God, how she regretted that she had not listened to these signals from the very beginning. She bit her lip, contemplating the slim possibility that if Bick had seen her quickly end the affair, their marriage might have survived even without confrontation. But what was the purpose of today's draw? She settled on two options that merged into one. He wanted her to know that he was still watching her, which implied that he cared. And given where her car was, he probably knew she was attending counseling. When Paula went outside the next morning, she glanced up and down the street. Is he watching? Since yesterday, it seemed to her that his eyes were constantly watching her. What should have been creepy seemed, on the contrary, strangely reassuring. She allowed herself the fantasy that if she tripped on the sidewalk, he would appear out of nowhere to catch her, just like he must have tried to stop her when she messed up with Bart. Several more weeks passed, and no new signals. Paula despaired. Has he lost interest? Did she make a mistake about how the car was parked? Or could it be interpreted as a goodbye? She called his number regularly, but less and less often. At the police department, Bick's partner and supervisor said that since they were not part of the task force, they had no contact with him. Paula wasn't sure if she would have been told the truth. Maybe, and she held on to that hope Bick was away on assignment, as Lancashire had said. This would mean that he made himself known during a short visit. His assignment was expected to last at least 6 months, her boss told her. 2/3 of this period have already passed. Exactly 5 months after Bick left, at 7:15 am, someone knocked loudly on Paula's door. Her heart beat even faster when she looked out the window and saw 2 men in suits on her doorstep, one with a small gold badge on his belt and an ID in a leather case in his hand. She held her breath before opening the door. 5 seconds 10. It seemed that by delaying, she was prolonging Bick's life. The knock was repeated, and she gave up. The tall FBI agent first made sure she was Bick's wife. "He's hurt," the man said, adding words that Pole couldn't hear at first. She was too busy realizing that the love of her life was at least alive. The short agent extended his hand to her, trying to calm her down. "It doesn't threaten his life and won't make him disabled," he said. "His right femur is broken. He is undergoing surgery now." "This is the femur," he clarified. "I can say that he was not wounded by the shot, and besides abrasions, he has no other injuries. I can't tell you what happened or where, only that it happened abroad. If there are no complications, he will return to the States by the end of the month." "How can I contact him?" asked Paula. The tall agent intervened as he saw his partner hesitate. "You can't, madam. According to his instructions. You remain his next of kin, which is why we are here. But he left a clear order for you not to try to contact him. We have never encountered this before, but it is none of our business. Management forwarded a written message from him addressed to you." He took an envelope from his inner coat pocket and handed it to her, adding, "We didn't read it." The low agent said, "I'm sorry," as both walked away into the shadows of their car. Of course, it was another dark Ford. Paula placed the letter on the kitchen table, staring at the envelope as if trying to read through its contents. Her gaze never left him, even as she inserted a fresh pod into the Keurig coffee maker. For 153 days, coffee has been her closest friend. Now, with her fingers wrapped around a cup of hot drink, she prayed that she would find at least a tiny bit of consolation in Bick's words, even the slightest. She tore the edge of the envelope. "Meet my flight or not. It's your choice. Lancashire will provide details." The words couldn't be more neutral. Paula screamed with joy, realizing that at least she would see him. But what will she say? What will he say? How to explain that she betrayed the most ideal husband she could imagine? Shared what you vowed to always keep only for him? How to describe addiction to cheap pleasures without alienating him forever? How do you get Bick to understand that Bart was never a threat to take her away and was never his match? And the most difficult thing, how to convince him that if he gives her a chance, she will always be faithful? For the first time in weeks, she cried herself to sleep. The daily anticipation of the opportunity to meet Bick was now replaced by the certainty of an imminent, inevitable meeting, which tied her stomach in a knot. The call from Lancashire came 2 weeks later. "Delta 898 arriving 5:05 p.m. Thursday," he said, and immediately hang up. His voice still sounded distant. Her answer was equally laconic. "Thank you. The meeting was supposed to take place tomorrow." For a brief moment, the choice of clothing seemed as important as the choice of words. Bick, in the end, will see her before he hears her. Coquettishly? No. This will highlight her misdeeds. Business style? It's too cold. Pants and blouse? Too androgynous. She opted for a casual dress and flats. An easy and comfortable image like their marriage, which she had lost and desperately hoped to return. At the Terminal B security checkpoint, she spotted him leaving the gate area. The silhouette in the distance is a man in sportswear on crutches. A man in a formal suit walked alongside, dragging a burgundy suitcase that Paula recognized as part of their shared set. She really wanted to rush to Bick, but she restrained herself, fearing not so much that she would knock him over, but that he might pull away. Of course, he invited her here himself. But for what? Bick gave her a mysterious smile, making her heart soar. He nodded to his gloomy companion, who nodded back and uttered only 3 words that momentarily froze Paula in place. Summit in, right? Vic nodded again. The agent with the suitcase disappeared towards the garage. Hi, Vic, Paula said. Are you okay? He raised one crutch, demonstrating that he would not fall. Then he spoke his first words in almost 6 months. I need to talk to you. There couldn't be a less comfortable place for revelations than a hotel Summit Inn, but it was there that Vic asked her to take him. Courtney Gladholder will be keeping an eye on me, he explained in the longest sentence he had spoken on the entire trip. She nodded, knowing full well that he knew that she knew how significant the name was. Arriving at the hotel was more difficult than she expected. Given Vic's condition, she used the services of a valet. She didn't recognize the guy, but was it a mocking look on his face or just a figment of her imagination? She recognized the concierge immediately. There was no mockery here, only eyes that seemed to study their own shoes. Paula winced as she realized that since Vic's suitcase had been delivered separately by an agent, she and her husband had arrived at the hotel without luggage, just as she had arrived here with Bart. Her gut wanted to scream, "This man is my husband," but reason forbade it. There were no problems at the front desk. Bart always handled the check-in himself while she waited somewhere off to the side. But the elevator, damn elevator, memories of those trips upstairs flashed through her mind. Then her knees shook from fear of discovery, but that was nothing compared to how they shook now. In the corridor following Vic, she thought that if she had fallen here, the man on crutches would definitely not have been able to catch her. As he stood at the door to his room, their number, she dared hope Paula stood back, studying the numbers 1089 taped to the door. She nearly jumped when his voice broke the silence. You've never been in this room, he said confidently. Courtney checked. It wasn't one of those rooms, but it was there. In a sense, all the numbers here were them. Her eyes darted around the room. Same wallpaper. The same curtains. The same fire alarm is on the ceiling above the bed. The same deep red bedspread that slipped so easily onto the floor. The same sofa with a low back ideal for. She stopped herself mid-sentence. The same shower cabin, spacious enough for 2. The trembling in her knees rose higher, covering her chest, which was now no less worried. Admitting guilt was one thing, but confronting the victim where it all happened was something else entirely. Vic's face did not express any emotion. This, she realized, was the same impassive look that many suspected killers had probably seen in the interrogation room. Piercing eyes, closed lips, ears tilted slightly forward to catch any sound. Vic leaned one crutch against the wall and, limping, leaned forward to sit on a chair. But first, he reached under his left pant leg and pulled a Glock Model 26 pistol from its holster. Paula gasped and pulled back. Vic looked at her as if she had gone crazy. With skillful movements, he removed the magazine from the handle and then pulled the bolt, removing the last cartridge from the chamber. Damn iron is too heavy, he explained, putting the weapon and ammunition into the drawer. He slowly sat down, placed his sore leg on the ottoman, and looked at her intently before asking, "Where do we start?" Paula spent months thinking about this moment. I rehearsed facial expressions, gestures, and words. But finding herself in front of this man in this place, and in the thrall of her guilt, she could not remember anything she had planned. Everything happened spontaneously. She knelt down, grabbed his hand with both of hers, and burst into tears, unable to take her eyes off the floor. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you. Only you. Only you. Only you. Only you." Did she say it 10 times? 30? When Paula dared to raise her eyes to meet his gaze, her breath caught in her throat. Vic was here in body, but not in spirit. He looked through her. Not fiercely, but just staring. His thoughts seemed to have little, if any, connection with what she was saying. A lot? A lot? Talk to me, Vic. His gaze focused on her face again, as if he was searching for answers to his questions, as if they were written on her skin. Sobbing, she blurted out, "If only I had recognized your signals, your warnings. Oh God, you tried to stop me, and I was too stupid to understand." Vic slowly shook his head, muttering in a barely audible voice. "What signals?" he asked in a tone that implied that he might not really understand what she was talking about. The last time they were together, life was good, at least on the outside. If Paula was tormented by feelings of guilt and Bick by suspicions, then they did not show it to each other. But now, after months of solitary suffering, they realized that their former closeness had disappeared. They were mired in the quagmire of Paula's betrayal. Nobody knew what to say next. "I'm sorry," Paula whispered. "I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything to me. I was so stupid. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I can't move on without asking for it," begging for him. Then she began to cry, trying in vain to find sympathy in the stern expression on Bick's face. "I have never loved anyone but you. I can never love anyone but you. I'm ready to do anything to keep you." Then a long silence. A knock on the door startled them both. Paula opened it and saw the face she sometimes saw in the office behind the summit in front desk, the face from that newspaper clipping. "Hello, Paula. Can I come in?" Gladholder asked. His tone seemed warm to her, despite the fact that they had only met once at the Hero Award ceremony, which now seemed like events of the distant past. He walked over to the sofa, his sympathetic smile instilling calm. Of all those who knew about her sin, only her psychologist was as kind. "Have you told her yet?" Gladholder asked Bick. Paula was confused. After all, she was the one who had to give explanations. "No," answered Bick. Paula's stomach sank, realizing that the men had some kind of shared secret. "I don't know how to do this," her husband muttered. Gladholder sighed and sat for at least 30 seconds, not taking his eyes off Beak. "Do you want me to start?" he asked. Nick nodded, then took out a handkerchief to wipe away his own tears. "Paula, your husband saved my life. Not could or might, but actually saved. This creates a special connection. He became like the son I never had. I wanted to keep an eye on him. And the former deputy police chief still has considerable authority in the department. But I'm getting ahead of myself." Gladholder paused and turned to Beak, asking permission to continue. "After I was shot, I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. As you probably know, Bick initially visited me every day while my prognosis remained uncertain. But even after it became clear that I would recover, he continued to come. My wife quickly realized why. It was a nurse named Ellie. I didn't notice this myself until the doctors stopped me from OxyContin. Bike would come in around 2:30 in the afternoon and disappear when her shift ended at 3. I didn't know you, Paula, although I knew about you. Everyone in the department said that Bick was crazy about you. But I have lived long enough to understand that true love is not a vaccine against temptation. Nurse Ellie was the epitome of temptation. It was obvious. Your husband was a little immature and very flattered by her attention." Bick waved his hand, and Gladholder fell silent. "We slept together, Paula. Me and Ellie. Once, in one of those cheap motels on the outskirts. I was on a wave of fame and felt entitled to anything. She recognized me from the news and launched an attack herself. I didn't even think about you. I didn't think you'd find out. On our first day together, right after our visit to Gladholder's hospital room, Ellie and I slept together. We had barely finished when my phone rang. The sergeant ordered me to urgently appear before the investigators to answer additional questions regarding the case of the attempt on Gladholder's life. It was strange because I had already given a full statement, and after all, I did not see the attack itself. What's even stranger is that the investigators asked almost nothing, but it spoiled my fun. 2 days later, when I checked into the same motel with Ellie, we were intercepted by 2 patrol cars. One of the officers quickly recognized me and apologized, explaining that someone in a car similar to mine had been threatening me with a gun nearby. Ellie was too scared to continue. I just drove her back to her car. Before we could try again, I helped Gladholder get home from the hospital. "Do you love your wife?" he suddenly asked me while we were driving. Without waiting for an answer, he added, "Because you either give her all your love, or you don't give it at all. And if you don't give it, your marriage is doomed. True love comes only once. Don't waste it." Hearing this, Paula groaned. Gladholder never told me he knew about my wrongdoing, Bick continued. He never admitted that he interfered, but I knew that these interruptions were not accidental. I knew this and loved him like a father for it. Bick turned to Polia. I have no excuses. It happened once, though many years ago. I didn't do that again, and I didn't even want to. To be honest, I don't know how long this could have gone on if the boss hadn't intervened. But I never stopped loving you, and I would never love Ellie. I was so afraid of losing you that I never confessed, although I was close to it a couple of times. Exhausted and sobbing, Bick fell silent. Gladholder continued the story. I noticed you when Bart first brought you to the summit, he told Paul. He was a regular customer for a couple of years with different women, so we always paid attention to him. We didn't like what he did, but there was little we could do about it. My heart sank when I recognized you. Paula, shaking and hugging herself by the shoulders, cried as the boss continued. You were a Wednesday girl, he said. Did you know that there was also a girl on Fridays? This question caused a sharp sob. The boss told how he waited for weeks to make sure the affair would end. When this did not happen, he finally fulfilled his duty to Bick. I'd rather put myself in harm's way again than tell that guy what you were doing. Now his eyes were clouded too. He left for the anti-terrorism group just a week after that. I couldn't look you in the face, explained Bick. I hated you. I was so angry I could have killed Bart, but I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything, because I was no better than you. I couldn't judge you without admitting what I did and letting you judge me. I was a coward. I didn't know what to do, so I left to think. And for you to think too. I didn't know if I could survive what you did, and if you could survive what I did. Paula began to sob and moan, asking for forgiveness for not noticing the warning signs. What would he do, she asked, if she understood them and left Bart? What signs? Asked Bick. His bewilderment made her realize that attempts to undermine her affair began long before the boss told her husband. She and Beak looked at Gladholder at the same time, who pursed his lips and nodded. Addressing Paul, he said, It worked with Bick. I thought it might work with you too. He added sadly, It's a pity not. He then briefly outlined his actions to destroy both banned novels. Paula asked why Gladholder didn't mention the incident with her car being moved outside the psychologist's office. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied. Bick just shrugged. The three sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, for a couple of minutes before Gladholder stood up and asked a one-word question. A lot? Receiving a nod in response, the older man walked out the door, pausing only long enough to say, I wish you both all the best. And again silence. 5 minutes seemed like an hour. Neither spouse dared to start a conversation. Paula was paralyzed by the realization that she was a greater sinner. Bick tried to comprehend a new reality for him. Although his work taught him to cope with countless tense situations, he always had the moral advantage. Still, he spoke first, remembering that Paula had apologized and he had not. I'm very sorry, he said. She peered into his face. You did a lot less than me. You stumbled once. I am maybe 10. I'm 10 times worse than you. Through sobs, she added, What are we going to do? But I did it first, he objected. Did you know? No. No. I had no idea. I didn't notice anything. I felt so guilty that I was sure that you would read it on my face, said Bick. I started every day by waiting for you to kick me out. Every night I lay awake, imagining how quickly I would have kicked you out if you had done what I did. Paula gasped. Is that what you're going to do now? Kick me out? Of course not. How could I? Paula, if Gladholder hadn't stopped me, who knows how many times I might have dated Ellie. Did you love her? No. Did you love him? Of course not. Was it for the ego? For the ego and nothing more. Silence fell again while they looked in each other's eyes for the answer to the question, what to do next? Was he better than me, Paul? More? Stronger? No, 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 she replied, thinking to herself that although she knew she should say it, it was also true. And she? Cuter? Slimmer? Hotter? No, he answered, lowering his head and shaking it, as if showing that he himself did not understand why he did what he did. Then both spoke at the same time, saying the same words. "I love you." Their embrace lasted forever, and their kiss of reconciliation lasted almost as long. They realized that not everything was completely fixed, but it was not nearly as destroyed as they had feared. Vic and Paula spent a week together at the Summit Inn, thanks to a wise old cop who was grateful for his second chance at life and eagerly embraced the opportunity to return the favor. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.